The dust kicked up beneath Catherine Sullivan's worn boots as she hauled the last barrel of water from the creek to the ranch house, her muscles burning from the exertion, and she knew without looking that the sun had already climbed high enough to make the afternoon work unbearable. She'd been living on the Stewart ranch for 3 months now, working harder than she ever had in her life, and nobody in Marysvale, Utah knew she existed beyond being the hired hand who kept to the shadows when respectable folk came calling. It was 1883, and a woman living alone with a man who was not her husband was scandal enough. But Catherine had nowhere else to go after her father's death, left her penniless and alone in a territory that had no mercy for women without protection. The ranch house stood solid against the backdrop of red rock cliffs that surrounded the small valley where Cole Stewart had built his life. Catherine set the barrel down near the kitchen door, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. Her dark hair had escaped its braid again, and she knew she looked wild and unkempt, nothing like the proper ladies who occasionally rode out from town with their parasols and pressed dresses. Those women never saw her, though. Cole always made sure she was occupied in the barn or out checking fences whenever he had visitors. She understood why. His reputation mattered in a place like Marysvale, where the Mormon settlers and the ranchers and the miners all watched each other with careful eyes. A single man in his late 20s with a woman living on his property would set tongues wagging, and Cole had worked too hard building his herd in his name to let scandal ruin it. So Catherine disappeared when company came, and she told herself it was a fair arrangement. He paid her wages, gave her a room in the small cabin behind the main house, and never once treated her with anything but professional courtesy. But it still stung. It stung every time she had to duck out the back door when she heard horses approaching. It stung when she watched from the barn loft as those town ladies brought him pies and smiled their pretty smiles. It stung because somewhere in the last 3 months, Catherine had done the foolish thing of falling in love with Cole Stewart, and she knew nothing could ever come of it. "Catherine!" Cole's voice carried across the yard, and she turned to see him striding toward her from the corral where he had been working with a new mare. He was tall and lean, built like the cowboys who had spent their whole lives in the saddle, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. His face was honest and open, the kind of face that made people trust him, and his gray eyes always held a kindness that Catherine had rarely encountered in men. "What is it?" she called back, shading her eyes against the noon sun. "Riders coming up the road," he said, and her stomach dropped. "Looks like James Hartford and some of the other ranchers, probably coming to discuss the range access situation." Catherine nodded, already moving toward the back of the house. This was the routine. She would make herself scarce, and Cole would entertain his guests without the complication of explaining her presence. She had made it 3 steps when Cole's voice stopped her. "Wait." She turned back, surprised. Cole stood with his hands on his hips, a strange expression on his face. He looked conflicted, like he was wrestling with something internal, and Catherine felt her heart begin to beat faster. I am tired of this," he said quietly. "I am tired of asking you to hide like you are something shameful. You work this ranch as hard as I do. You have earned your place here." "Cole, we talked about this," Catherine said, keeping her voice steady even though hope was beginning to flutter dangerously in her chest. "Your reputation matters. I do not want to cause you trouble." "My reputation," Cole repeated, and there was something bitter in his tone. "What good is a reputation built on lies? What good is respect from people who would not give you the time of day if they knew the truth of how you live?" The riders were getting closer now. Catherine could hear the sound of hooves on the packed dirt road that led to the ranch. She should go. She should disappear like always. But Cole was looking at her with an intensity that rooted her to the spot. "Stay," he said. "Please. Let me introduce you properly. As my partner. As my equal." "Cole, that is crazy," Catherine whispered, but her feet would not move. "They will never accept it. They will never accept me." "Then they can leave my property," Cole said, and his jaw was set in that stubborn way she had learned meant he had made up his mind. "I am done hiding you away. I am done pretending you do not matter." The riders crested the small rise that marked the entrance to the Stewart ranch, and Catherine felt panic and exhilaration war inside her chest. This was it. This was the moment that would either change everything or ruin the fragile peace she had built here. Cole moved to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body in the afternoon sun. James Hartford led the group, a prosperous rancher in his 50s with a thick mustache and the bearing of a man used to being in charge. Behind him rode Thomas Yates, Samuel Pierce, and George Whitmore, all established men in the Marysvale area. They pulled up their horses in front of the house, and Catherine watched their faces shift from friendly greeting to confusion as they took in her presence beside Cole. "Afternoon, Cole," James said, tipping his hat. His eyes flickered to Catherine in a way, uncertain. "We came to discuss the water rights situation up in the northern pastures. The territorial office has been making noises about regulating access." "Afternoon, James, gentlemen," Cole said, and his voice was steady and clear. "Before we get into that, I want to introduce you properly to someone. This is Catherine Walsh, my partner and equal in the running of this ranch. She has been working beside me for 3 months now, and this operation would not be half of what it is without her contribution." The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine felt the weight of 4 sets of eyes on her, ranging from shock to disapproval to outright confusion. She lifted her chin and met their gazes squarely, refusing to shrink away. Cole had given her this moment, and she would not waste it by appearing ashamed. "Your partner," James finally said, and his tone was carefully neutral. "Cole, I'm not sure what arrangement you have here, but you have to understand how this looks." "I understand exactly how it looks," Cole said, and there was steel in his voice now. "It looks like a man and a woman working together to build something worthwhile. Catherine is an equal partner in this ranch, with equal say in how it is run. She handles the books, manages the supply orders, and works the land same as I do. If you have come to discuss business with me, then you are discussing business with both of us." Thomas Yates shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "Cole, be reasonable. A woman cannot be a ranch partner. What happens when she marries? What happens when she decides ranching is too hard and wants to go back east? What happens when any partner decides to leave?" Cole countered. "You are making assumptions about Catherine based on nothing but her gender. I am telling you that she is as committed to this land as I am, and she deserves your respect." Catherine felt something crack open in her chest. No one had ever defended her like this. No one had ever stood up to powerful men on her behalf and demanded they see her as an equal. She wanted to speak, to add her own voice to Cole's, but her throat was tight with emotion. George Whitmore, who had been silent until now, leaned forward in his saddle. "Miss Walsh, is it? Where do you hail from?" Catherine found her voice. "Illinois originally, Mr. Whitmore. I came to Utah with my father 5 years ago. He passed away this spring, and I was fortunate that Mr. Stewart was willing to give me employment when I had nowhere else to turn." "Employment is one thing," George said, not unkindly. "But partnership? That is a different matter entirely. What qualifications do you have to run a cattle ranch?" "The same qualifications most men have when they start," Catherine said, and she was grateful her voice came out strong and clear. "I can read and write and do figures. I learn quickly, and I'm not afraid of hard work. I've been keeping the books for this ranch and helping with the breeding records. I can ride and rope and mend fence. I can shoot when I need to. What other qualifications do you require?" Samuel Pierce let out a low whistle. "She has got fire. I will give her that." "This is improper, Cole," James said, shaking his head. "You are a single man, and she is an unmarried woman, living on the same property, working together all day. Surely you can see how this will be perceived by decent folk." "If decent folk choose to think the worst, that says more about them than it does about us," Cole said. "Catherine lives in the cabin behind the main house. Our arrangement is professional and proper, but even if it were not, that would be our business and no one else's." Catherine felt her cheeks heat at that last statement. She glanced at Cole, but he was staring down James Hartford with an expression that dared the older man to push further. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, James sighed and dismounted. "I do not approve, and I will not pretend I do. But it is your ranch, Cole, and your reputation to manage. If you want to conduct business with Miss Walsh present, that is your choice. I came here to discuss water rights, and that matter is too important to let personal disagreements get in the way." It was not acceptance, but it was a truce. The other men dismounted as well, and Cole gestured toward the house. "Catherine, would you mind getting some water for our guests? I believe we have a long discussion ahead of us." For just a moment, Catherine bristled. After all that, he was sending her to fetch water like a servant. But then she caught the slight shake of his head, the message in his eyes. This was strategic. The men needed time to adjust to the idea of her presence, and giving them space while still including her in the hospitality of the ranch was a calculated move. She was learning that Cole thought several steps ahead in most situations. "Of course," she said. "I will bring it to the sitting room." She went inside through the front door, not the back entrance she usually used, and she heard Cole leading the men into the house behind her. Her hands shook slightly as she pumped water into a pitcher and gathered glasses. The sound of male voices drifted from the other room, discussing fence lines and territorial regulations and the eternal problem of water access in Utah's high desert country. Catherine arranged everything on a tray and carried it into the sitting room. The men had settled into chairs, and Cole sat in his usual spot near the window. There was an empty chair beside him, and when Catherine entered, he gestured to it. "Catherine should hear this discussion," he said to the others. "The water rights affect our northern pastures, and she's been surveying that area with me." James looked like he wanted to protest, but he bit back whatever comment he had planned. Catherine set the tray on the side table and poured water for each man before taking the offered seat beside Cole. It felt surreal, sitting in this room with these powerful ranchers as if she belonged here, as if her opinion mattered. The discussion was technical and sometimes heated. The territorial government was talking about implementing a permit system for water access, which would affect all the ranchers who ran their cattle in the open range areas. James wanted to organize a unified response, a petition signed by all the major landholders in the area. Thomas thought they should send a representative to the territorial capital. Samuel was worried about the cost of compliance if the permits went through. Catherine listened carefully, following the threads of the conversation. She knew the northern pastures well. She had ridden up there with Cole just last week to check on the young steers they had moved to the higher elevation for summer grazing. The creek that ran through that area was fed by snowmelt from the mountains, and it was the most reliable water source for miles. "If they implement the permit system, we will need documentation of prior use," Catherine said during a lull in the conversation. "Cole and I have been mapping the water sources on this ranch and recording which areas we graze by season. That documentation could support our claim to continued access." The men turned to look at her, and she saw surprise on several faces. Thomas leaned back in his chair. "That's good thinking, Miss Walsh. Documentation will be key if this goes to any kind of legal proceeding." "Catherine has been organizing all our ranch records," Cole said, and there was pride in his voice. "We can provide testimony of continuous use going back at least 5 years, which should be sufficient under most regulatory frameworks." The discussion continued, and gradually Catherine found herself drawn into it more fully. She answered questions about the Stewart Ranch's water usage and grazing patterns. She suggested coordinating with the other ranchers to share surveying costs. When George mentioned that his wife had been keeping similar records, Catherine offered to compare notes with her to ensure their documentation was consistent and thorough. By the time the men rose to leave, the atmosphere had shifted. It was not quite acceptance, but the open hostility had faded. James even nodded to Catherine as he put his hat back on. "Miss Walsh, I hope you understand my concerns came from a place of caring about this community and the people in it," he said. "I understand, Mr. Hartford," Catherine replied. "I hope you will come to see that I want the best for this community as well. My future is tied to this ranch and to Marysvale's prosperity just as much as yours is." After the men rode away, Catherine stood on the porch and watched the dust settle behind them. Her heart was still racing, adrenaline making her fingers tingle. Cole came to stand beside her, so close that his shoulder brushed hers. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Cole said, and when she looked up at him, his gray eyes were intense. "I have been a coward, Catherine. I let you hide for 3 months because I was worried about what people would think. But the truth is, I do not care what they think. Not anymore. You are the best thing that has happened to this ranch, and to me, and I am done pretending otherwise." Catherine's breath caught. There was something in his voice, in the way he was looking at her, that made her heart stutter. "Cole, I know this is not the time, he said, his voice rough. I know you have been through hell, losing your father and being alone in a place that has not been kind to you. I do not want to take advantage of your situation or make you feel obligated in any way, but I need you to know that my reasons for standing up for you today were not purely professional. What were they? Catherine whispered, though she thought she knew. She hoped she knew. I am falling in love with you, Cole said simply. I think I've been falling for weeks now, watching you work yourself to exhaustion, seeing how smart and capable and brave you are. When those men looked at you with judgment today, it made me furious. Not because it reflected poorly on me, but because they could not see what I see when I look at you. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. What do you see? I see my partner, Cole said. My equal. The woman I want to build a life with, if she would consider having me. She turned to face him fully, reaching up to touch his face. His skin was warm beneath her palm, rough with the stubble he always had by afternoon. You really mean it, she said, wonder in her voice. You are not just saying this because you feel responsible for me. I have never meant anything more in my life, Cole said, and he covered her hand with his, holding it against his cheek. Catherine Walsh, you have turned my world upside down in the best possible way. I want you here not as a hired hand or even as a business partner, though you are damn good at both. I want you here as my wife, as the woman I wake up beside every morning and fall asleep next to every night. I want to build this ranch with you to make a life that belongs to both of us equally. I love you, Catherine said, and the words felt like freedom. I have loved you for so long, Cole, but I never thought you could feel the same way. I thought I was just convenient, just useful. You are essential, Cole corrected, and then he was kissing her, his lips warm and gentle against hers. Catherine melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck as he pulled her close. The kiss was everything she had imagined, and more, full of promise and passion and a tenderness that made her want to cry. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said, not because it is practical or because it will silence the gossips, though it will do both of those things. Marry me because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Yes, Catherine said, laughing through tears that were spilling down her cheeks now. Yes, of course I will marry you. They stood on the porch holding each other, as the sun began its descent toward the red rock cliffs, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Catherine thought about the long road that had brought her here, all the pain and loss and fear. She thought about her father, who had tried his best to give her a better life, and who would have liked Cole Stewart very much. She thought about the moment 3 months ago when she had arrived at this ranch desperate and alone, and how Cole had looked at her not with pity, but with respect. We should probably discuss the practical aspects, Cole said after a long moment, though he made no move to release her. I want to do this properly. I know Reverend Matthews will marry us, though we will probably have to endure a lecture about the impropriety of our current living arrangement first. Catherine laughed. I can endure a lecture. I have endured worse. I want to add your name to the ranch deed, Cole continued. True equal partnership, not just in work but in ownership. Whatever we build together. You do not have to do that, Catherine said, pulling back to look at him. I trust you. I know you do, but I want to do it anyway, Cole said firmly. You have earned your place here, Catherine. I want it in writing, legal, and binding. The Stewart Walsh Ranch. The Walsh Stewart Ranch, Catherine countered with a smile. We can argue about it later, Cole said, kissing her forehead. For now, I think we have a wedding to plan. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small church in Marysvale, with most of the town in attendance. Catherine wore a simple blue dress that Cole had paid for, though she had protested the expense, and she carried wildflowers that she had picked from the meadow behind the ranch house. Cole wore his best suit, and his hands shook slightly as he slipped the gold band onto her finger. Reverend Matthews did indeed lecture them about proper conduct before the ceremony, but he also smiled when he pronounced them husband and wife. May the Lord bless this union, he said, and may you both find joy in the life you are building together. The reception was held at the Hartford Ranch, a gesture of acceptance that Catherine had not expected. James's wife Martha had organized it, and though the older woman was formal in her manner, she was not unkind. "You have taken on a difficult path, my dear," Martha told Catherine as they stood together watching the dancing. "Running a ranch is hard work for anyone, but especially for a woman. If you ever need advice or just another woman to talk to, my door's open." "Thank you," Catherine said, genuinely touched. "That means more than you know." "Cole is a good man," Martha continued, "one of the best. He will treat you well. And from what I have heard, you are more than capable of holding your own. That is good. A partnership requires strength on both sides." As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, Catherine found herself pulled into conversations with the other ranch wives, women who had been distant or absent from her life until now. Some were curious, some were cautious, but most seemed willing to give her a chance now that she was a respectable married woman. It was frustrating in some ways that marriage changed how they viewed her, but Catherine was practical enough to accept the social reality she lived in. When it was finally time to leave, Cole helped her into the wagon, and they rode back to the ranch under a sky full of stars. Catherine leaned against his shoulder, exhausted but happy, watching the familiar landscape roll by in the moonlight. "Are you glad we did it?" Cole asked quietly. "Getting married or having half of Marysvale witness it?" Catherine asked with a tired laugh. "Both." "Yes," Catherine said firmly. "I'm glad. Though I confess I'm looking forward to getting back to work. 3 weeks of wedding preparations was 3 weeks of neglecting the ranch accounts, and I know we have expenses to review." Cole laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest where Catherine rested against him. "Ever practical, my wife. We have a wedding night ahead of us, and you are thinking about expense accounts." Catherine felt her cheeks heat, grateful for the darkness that hid her blush. "I am nervous," she admitted. "About tonight, about everything changing." "Nothing important is changing," Cole said, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of the ranch house. He turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "We are still the same people we were this morning, still partners, still equals. The only difference is that now I get to call you my wife and wake up beside you every morning without worrying about what the neighbors will say." "When you put it that way, it sounds wonderful," Catherine said. "It will be wonderful," Cole promised, kissing her softly. "All of it. I swear to you, Catherine, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret this," Catherine said. "You gave me a home when I had nothing. You treated me with respect when the world told you I did not deserve it. You stood up for me when it would have been easier to send me away. How could I regret loving you?" Cole carried her over the threshold of the main house, and Catherine laughed at the traditional gesture even as she clung to his neck. He had moved her things from the cabin to the bedroom in the main house earlier that week, and seeing her dresses hanging beside his shirts in the wardrobe had made the reality of their marriage hit home. This was her house now, her life, her future. That night was tender and awkward and beautiful in turns. Cole was patient, taking his time, making sure Catherine felt safe and cherished. When she cried afterward, he held her close and stroked her hair, whispering reassurances until she could explain that the tears were from happiness, from the overwhelming relief of being truly wanted for the first time in longer than she could remember. "I love you," she told him, tracing patterns on his chest in the darkness. "I do not think I can say it enough. I love you, Cole Stewart." "I love you too, Catherine Stewart," he replied, and the sound of her new name made her smile. "Now sleep. Tomorrow we have a ranch to run, and you know how demanding my business partner can be about starting work on time." Catherine laughed and let herself drift off to sleep, safe and warm in her husband's arms, in the house that was now truly hers, on the land she would spend the rest of her life helping to build and protect. The months that followed were not without challenges. Some in town remained skeptical of Catherine's role in the ranch operation, and there were whispers about impropriety and unconventional arrangements, but Catherine discovered that being a married woman gave her a kind of armor against the worst of the gossip. She was Mrs. Stewart now, a respectable rancher's wife, even if she did wear trousers more often than skirts, and could rope a steer as well as most men. The water rights situation that had brought the ranchers to their door that fateful day was resolved through a combination of documentation and negotiation. Catherine's meticulous record-keeping proved invaluable, and the territorial office granted the Stewart Ranch continued access to the northern pastures. George Whitmore made a point of thanking her publicly at a community meeting, and Catherine saw the surprise on some faces when he praised her organizational skills and sharp mind. Slowly, grudgingly, Marysvale began to accept Catherine as more than just Cole's wife. When Martha Hartford's husband fell ill and she needed help managing their books, she asked Catherine for assistance. When the schoolteacher was organizing a literacy program for the miners' children, she sought Catherine's advice on funding and supplies. When several of the ranch wives wanted to petition the territorial government for better mail service, they elected Catherine to write the letter. Cole watched his wife's growing integration into the community with pride and satisfaction. He had known from the start that Catherine was special, that she had skills and intelligence that deserved recognition. Seeing others finally acknowledge what he had seen all along felt like vindication. A year after their wedding, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but waited until she was certain before telling Cole. When she finally did, over breakfast on a cool autumn morning, he nearly dropped his coffee cup. "Are you sure?" he asked, his face lighting up with joy. "As sure as I can be," Catherine said, smiling at his reaction. "I estimate the baby will come in late spring, May or early June." Cole came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Catherine asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Cole said. "Catherine, you have given me everything I did not know I wanted. A true partnership, a real marriage, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was difficult at times. Catherine struggled with nausea in the early months, and as she grew larger, the physical work of ranching became more challenging. Cole insisted on hiring additional help, a young man named Peter, who could handle the heavy lifting that Catherine could no longer manage. Catherine chafed at the restrictions, but had to admit that she needed the assistance. Martha Hartford became an unexpected ally during this time, visiting regularly and sharing advice from her own experiences raising 4 children. "Do not let anyone tell you that you have to give up who you are just because you are becoming a mother," Martha told her during one visit. "I ran this ranch alongside James, even with babies on my hip. It is not easy, but it is possible. And from what I have seen, you are more than capable." The baby was born on a warm May evening in 1885, with Martha and the local midwife in attendance. Cole paced outside the bedroom door, wearing a path in the floorboards, until finally the thin wail of a newborn cut through the air. Martha emerged a few minutes later, smiling. "You have a son," she announced, "a healthy boy with good lungs, and Catherine came through beautifully. She is asking for you." Cole rushed into the room to find his wife propped up against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. Catherine looked up at him with tears streaming down her face, and Cole felt his own eyes begin to burn. "Meet your son," Catherine said softly, and Cole sat carefully on the edge of the bed, peering down at the small, red, wrinkled face of his child. The baby's eyes were squeezed shut, and he was making small mewing sounds that were the sweetest thing Cole had ever heard. "He is perfect," Cole whispered. "You are perfect. Catherine, I have no words for what I am feeling right now." "Neither do I," Catherine said, looking down at the baby with wonder. "We made this perfect little person. What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Cole thought about the journey that had brought them here. "What about Daniel?" he suggested. "It means God is my judge, and I like the idea of him judging for himself what is right, not just accepting what society tells him." "Daniel Stewart," Catherine said, testing the name. "Daniel Walsh Stewart, to carry both our names." "That is perfect," Cole agreed. "Welcome to the world, Daniel." Adjusting to life with a baby was chaotic. Daniel was a demanding infant, hungry often and prone to crying in the middle of the night. Catherine was exhausted, trying to balance motherhood with her responsibilities to the ranch. Cole did everything he could to help, changing diapers and walking the floor with a fussy baby while Catherine caught a few hours of sleep. Peter proved his worth during those early months, taking on more of the daily ranch work so that Cole could be present for his wife and son. The young man was from Kansas, new to Utah, and grateful for steady employment and the chance to learn from an established rancher. He was respectful of Catherine's authority and never questioned her right to give orders regarding ranch operations. When Daniel was 3 months old, Catherine strapped him to her chest and began accompanying Cole on shorter ranch trips again. She refused to be completely sidelined, and Cole had learned not to argue with his wife when she had that determined set to her jaw. They made adjustments, keeping closer to the house and planning routes that would allow for frequent feeding stops. But they found a rhythm that worked. Watching Catherine with their son, Cole fell in love with her all over again. She was fierce in her protection of Daniel, but also gentle, singing to him in a sweet voice Cole had never heard her use before. She was determined that their son would grow up knowing that women were just as capable as men, that partnerships meant true equality, that respect was earned through action, not bestowed by birth. He will be different, Catherine told Cole one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset while Daniel nursed. Our son will grow up seeing a mother who works and a father who is not threatened by her strength. He will understand that women are people, not property or ornaments. That has to make a difference. It will make all the difference, Cole agreed, and if we have daughters, they will grow up knowing they can be ranchers or anything else they want to be. If we have daughters? Catherine asked with a raised eyebrow. Are you planning on more children, Mr. Stewart? I would not object to it if you are willing, Cole said, but only when you are ready. You are the one who has to carry them and birth them. I will not pressure you. I think I would like Daniel to have siblings, Catherine said thoughtfully. Not right away, but eventually. A house full of children sounds lovely. By the time Daniel was a year old, the Stewart Ranch had become one of the most prosperous operations in the Marysville area. Catherine's attention to breeding records and careful management of resources had paid off in better cattle prices and lower losses. Cole's reputation as a fair dealer and a skilled rancher was enhanced by his wife's contributions, and most people in the area had stopped questioning their partnership arrangement. There were still moments of friction. When Catherine attended a cattlemen's association meeting with Cole, one of the newer ranchers made a comment about women not belonging in business discussions. Cole had started to respond, but Catherine beat him to it. I belong anywhere I choose to be, she said calmly but firmly. My name is on the deed to one of the largest ranches in this valley. I have kept books and breeding records that have increased our profitability by 30% in 2 years. I've negotiated contracts and managed supply chains. If you would like to question my qualifications, please feel free to compare your ranch's output to mine. Otherwise, I suggest you keep your outdated opinions to yourself. The man had sputtered and turned red, but several other ranchers laughed, and George Whitmore clapped slowly. She has got you there, Henderson. Best not to tangle with Mrs. Stewart. She is smarter than most of us put together. Cole had squeezed Catherine's hand under the table, pride radiating from him. That night, he told her how magnificent she had been. You did not need me to defend you, he said. You handled that perfectly on your own. I have been practicing that speech in my head for months, Catherine admitted with a laugh. I knew eventually someone would challenge me directly, and I wanted to be ready. You are always ready, Cole said, pulling her into his arms. That is one of the 1,000 things I love about you. When Daniel was 2, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because her body was better prepared. She continued working almost until the day she went into labor, much to Martha Hartford's exasperation. You are going to have that baby in the middle of a field if you are not careful, Martha scolded, but there was affection in her voice. At least stay close to the house in these final weeks. The second baby, a daughter they named Laura, was born in February 1887 during a late winter snow. She came into the world quickly and easily, letting out an indignant cry as soon as she was born. Cole laughed when he first held her. She has your temper, he told Catherine. Listen to that. She is furious about something already. She is cold and confused, Catherine said, reaching for her daughter. Give her here. Daniel was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Cole and Catherine taught him to be gentle, to support her head when he held her, to bring diapers when they were needed. The little boy took his role as big brother seriously, and it warmed Catherine's heart to see the tender way he touched Laura's tiny fingers. With 2 children now, the ranch operations required even more careful coordination. Cole took on more of the outdoor work while Catherine managed things from the house, handling correspondence and accounts while keeping an eye on the children. They hired a young woman named Sarah to help with cooking and cleaning, which freed Catherine to focus on the parts of ranch management she was best at. The years passed in a blur of hard work and domestic joy. Daniel grew into a bright, curious boy who wanted to know everything about how the ranch worked. Laura proved to be as stubborn and determined as her mother, refusing to let her older brother do anything she could not also attempt. Cole and Catherine watched their children grow with amazement and gratitude, marveling at how their family had expanded. In the spring of 1889, when Daniel was 4 and Laura was 2, Catherine discovered she was pregnant for a third time. She and Cole had talked about whether they wanted more children, and both agreed that their family felt complete with 2, but Catherine had always had irregular cycles, and tracking her fertility was not an exact science in the 1880s. "Are you disappointed?" Catherine asked Cole when she told him. "Disappointed? Never," Cole said immediately. "Surprised maybe, but never disappointed. Every child is a blessing. We will figure it out, just like we always do." This third pregnancy was more challenging. Catherine was older now, nearly 30, and she felt every ache and pain more acutely than she had with the first 2. She was forced to step back from ranch work more than she wanted, delegating tasks to Peter and Sarah and trusting Cole to handle things she usually managed herself. It was difficult for her to relinquish control, but she recognized the necessity. The baby, another son they named Marcus, was born in early December, just as the first major snow of the season hit. It was a difficult birth, longer and more painful than the others, and for a few frightening hours the midwife was concerned about Catherine's bleeding. Cole stood by helplessly, holding Daniel and Laura in the other room and praying harder than he ever had in his life. But Catherine was strong, and she fought through the complications. When he was finally allowed back into the bedroom, Cole found his wife pale and exhausted but alive, with a small dark-haired baby at her breast. Tears streamed down Cole's face as he gathered his family close. "Do not ever scare me like that again," he whispered fiercely against Catherine's hair. "I do not plan to," Catherine said weakly. "I think 3 children is enough for us, Cole. I'm not sure I could survive another birth." 3 is perfect," Cole agreed. "We have everything we could possibly need right here." Marcus proved to be a quieter baby than his siblings, content to watch the world with serious dark eyes. Daniel and Laura adored him, fighting over who got to help feed him or hold him. The house was constantly full of noise and activity, and while it was exhausting, Cole and Catherine would not have traded it for anything. As the children grew, Catherine made sure they all understood the history of the ranch and the partnership that had built it. She told them about the day she arrived desperate and alone, about how their father had given her a chance when no one else would. She told them about the day Cole introduced her as his equal partner, standing up to powerful men who thought a woman had no place in ranching. She told them how important it was to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their gender or circumstances. "Your father saved my life," Catherine told them one evening as they sat together by the fire. "Not by giving me money or shelter, though he did those things too. He saved my life by seeing me as a person with value and potential. He taught me that I did not have to accept the limitations other people tried to put on me. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me, and it is the gift I want to give to all of you." Cole, listening from his chair, felt his throat tighten with emotion. After all these years, Catherine could still move him to tears with her words and her strength and her unflinching honesty. He had thought he was doing her a favor by hiring her all those years ago, but the truth was that she had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. By 1895, Daniel was 10, Laura was 8, and Marcus was 6. The children were growing up wild and free on the ranch, learning to ride before they could read, understanding cattle and weather and the rhythms of the land. Daniel showed promise as a natural cattleman, with an instinct for animals that reminded Cole of his own father. Laura was brilliant with numbers and organization, clearly taking after her mother. Marcus was still finding his way, but he had a gentle spirit and a gift for working with the more difficult horses. The Stewart Ranch, now officially registered under both Cole and Catherine's names, was one of the most successful operations in southern Utah. They had expanded their holdings, purchased better breeding stock, and developed a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. Catherine's business acumen had proven as valuable as Cole's ranching knowledge, and together they had built something that would last for generations. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Cole reached over and took Catherine's hand. She was 12 years older than the desperate young woman who had arrived at his door, and the years had left their mark. Her hands were calloused from work, her face weathered by sun and wind, her dark hair streaked with premature gray. But to Cole, she had never been more beautiful. "Do you remember the day I introduced you as my equal partner?" he asked. "How could I forget?" Catherine said with a smile. "I thought you had lost your mind." "I was terrified." "I was terrified too," Cole admitted, "but I knew it was the right thing to do. I was tired of hiding the truth of who you were and what you meant to me." "That was the day everything changed," Catherine said softly. "That was the day I stopped being invisible and started being myself. That was the day I knew you truly loved me." "I will never stop loving you," Cole said, "in this life and whatever comes after. You are my partner, my equal, my heart. Everything good in my life comes back to you." "We built something special here," Catherine said, looking out at the ranch that spread before them. "Not just a successful business, but a family and a life that matters. Our children will grow up knowing that women and men can be true partners. They will grow up seeing respect and equality modeled every day. That legacy matters more than any amount of land or cattle." "It does," Cole agreed. "And it all started with you being brave enough to ask for a chance, and me being smart enough to give it to you." "We were both brave," Catherine said, squeezing his hand, "and we were both lucky to find each other." As the sun set over the red cliffs and painted the sky in brilliant colors, Cole and Catherine sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children and counting their blessings. The road had not always been easy, and there had been times when Catherine's role as a female ranch partner had caused friction in the community. But they had weathered every storm together, as true partners in every sense of the word. The children eventually came inside, tired and dirty from their play. Catherine supervised baths while Cole started dinner, their domestic routine well established and comfortable. After the children were in bed, Cole and Catherine sat together in their bedroom, talking quietly about the next day's work and the long-term plans for the ranch. "Daniel is getting old enough that we should start teaching him the business side of things," Catherine said. "The breeding records and the accounts. He has a good head for it, and he should understand that ranching is not just about riding and roping. And Laura wants to learn to rope," Cole added with a smile. "She saw Daniel working with the calves yesterday and insisted she could do it better." "She probably can," Catherine said fondly. "That girl has more determination than sense sometimes." "I wonder where she gets that," Cole teased, and Catherine swatted his arm. "From her father, obviously," she said primly, and they both laughed. Later, lying in the darkness with Cole's arm around her, Catherine thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the young woman she had been, scared and alone and certain that her life was over. She thought about the man who had looked past society's expectations and seen her potential. She thought about the day he had stood up for her in front of powerful men, declaring her his equal, even when it cost him respect and acceptance. "Cole," she whispered. He responded sleepily. "Thank you for not letting me disappear. Thank you for making me visible." Cole pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You were always worth seeing, Catherine. Always. I just made sure other people saw it too." The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and joys. The children grew and developed their own personalities and interests. Daniel indeed took to the business side of ranching, working alongside his mother to manage the accounts and breeding records. Laura surprised no one by insisting on learning every skill her brother learned, often surpassing him in determination, if not always in physical strength. Marcus found his calling in training horses, developing a patient, gentle approach that produced some of the most reliable mounts in the territory. By the turn of the century, the Stewart Ranch was being run by a true family partnership. Daniel, now 15, was taking on more responsibility. Laura, at 13, was already showing signs of being a formidable businesswoman. Marcus, at 11, spent every spare moment in the corrals with the horses. Cole and Catherine stepped back gradually, allowing their children to learn through experience while still providing guidance and support. In 1902, when Catherine was 43, Martha Hartford passed away after a brief illness. The funeral brought together most of the ranching community, and Catherine was asked to speak about her friendship with the older woman. Standing before the assembled mourners, Catherine talked about how Martha had been one of the first to accept her, to offer friendship and support when most women in Marysvale had been uncertain about the unconventional Mrs. Stewart. Martha understood that strength comes in many forms, Catherine said, her voice steady despite her grief. She understood that being a wife and mother and rancher were not contradictory roles, but complementary ones. She showed me that it was possible to be all the things I wanted to be. I will miss her wisdom and her kindness more than I can express. After the funeral, several of the younger women in the community approached Catherine, asking if she would consider organizing a women's group to discuss business and ranch management. They were inspired by her example and wanted to learn from her experience. Catherine agreed, and the Marysvale Women's Ranching Association was born. The group met monthly, and Catherine found joy in mentoring the next generation of women ranchers. She taught them about record-keeping and contract negotiation, about managing employees and understanding market conditions. She also talked about the personal challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated field, about demanding respect and refusing to accept limitations. Cole supported his wife's work with the association completely, often contributing his own perspective on how male allies could help promote equality. Listen to the women in your lives, he told the husbands who sometimes attended meetings. Trust their judgment and their abilities. Defend them when others question their competence. And for the love of God, do not expect them to disappear when company comes. If they are your partners, treat them as equals in all circumstances. His words always made Catherine smile, remembering that pivotal day so many years ago when he had first spoken those same sentiments. They had built an entire life on that foundation of mutual respect and genuine partnership, and seeing the impact their example had on others filled her with satisfaction. In 1905, Daniel married a young woman named Emily from a neighboring ranch. Emily had been raised by parents who valued education and independence, and she and Daniel formed a partnership that mirrored his parents' relationship. When they had their first child, a daughter named Catherine in honor of her grandmother, Cole and Catherine felt the beautiful continuity of family and values passing to the next generation. Laura, true to form, announced at 18 that she had no intention of marrying anytime soon. "I want to travel," she told her parents. "I want to see the cities back east, maybe even go to California. There is so much world out there, and I want to experience it before I settle down." Catherine understood her daughter's restlessness perfectly. If she had been born a generation later, she might have had the same desires. "Go," she told Laura. "See the world. Learn everything you can. The ranch will be here when you are ready to come home, if you decide to come home." "You are not disappointed?" Laura asked. "Disappointed? I am proud," Catherine said firmly. "You are brave enough to choose your own path, just like I taught you to be. How could I be disappointed in that?" Marcus, steady and quiet, seemed content to stay close to home. He took over the horse training operation completely, developing a reputation that brought buyers from across the territory. When he was 19, he fell in love with a quiet girl named Hannah, who worked at the general store, and they married in a simple ceremony the following year. By 1910, Cole and Catherine were in their 50s, their children grown and building lives of their own. They had 7 grandchildren between them, and the Stewart Ranch employed 12 people full-time. The operation had expanded beyond anything they had imagined in those early days, encompassing thousands of acres and multiple enterprises beyond just cattle. One spring evening, Cole and Catherine took a ride up to the northern pastures, just the two of them like they used to do before the children were born. They rode in comfortable silence, enjoying the landscape that had been the backdrop of their entire life together. When they reached the creek where the water rights dispute had once threatened their livelihood, they dismounted and sat together on a fallen log, watching the water flow past. "Do you have any regrets?" Cole asked, breaking the silence. Catherine thought about it carefully. "About specific choices?" Perhaps I wish I had been braver sooner in some instances, more patient in others. But about the life we have built together. Not a single regret. You gave me everything I did not know I needed, Cole. Purpose and respect and love, a family and a future. How could I regret any of that? I was thinking the same thing, Cole said. If I could go back and change anything, I would have stood up for you sooner. I would not have asked you to hide that first 3 months. You deserved better from the start. You gave me exactly what I needed exactly when I needed it, Catherine said, leaning against his shoulder. You gave me work and dignity first, and then you gave me love. That was the right order for me. I needed to know I could stand on my own before I could trust in leaning on someone else. We have been so lucky, Cole said, to find each other, to build this life, to raise children who carry on the values we believe in. Not everyone gets that. No, they do not, Catherine agreed, but we worked for it too. Luck brought us together, but we chose to stay together. We chose to fight for each other and for this partnership. That matters. They sat by the creek until the sun began to set, then rode back to the ranch house as the stars came out. The house that had once felt so empty to Cole was now filled with memories of laughter and tears, of arguments and reconciliations, of countless ordinary moments that added up to an extraordinary life. That night, lying in their bed, Cole pulled Catherine close and whispered, "I love you. Still, always, forever." "I love you too," Catherine whispered back. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for making me your equal when the world said I should not be. Thank you for every day of this beautiful life." "Thank you for being brave enough to stay," Cole replied. "Thank you for being my partner in all things. I'm the man I was meant to be because you were beside me." They fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had defied expectations and built something lasting, two souls who had recognized in each other the possibility of true partnership and genuine love. The years continued to roll by, bringing the inevitable changes that time brings. Cole's hair turned fully gray, then white. Catherine's hands grew more arthritic, making the detailed ledger work harder, though she refused to give it up entirely. They slowed down but never stopped, always involved in the ranch operations even as their children and grandchildren took on more responsibility. In the winter of 1920, Cole fell ill with pneumonia. The doctor was called, and for a week, Catherine barely left his bedside. Their children gathered, bringing the grandchildren to see the grandfather they adored. Cole rallied, his strong constitution fighting off the infection, but the illness left him weaker than before. "I am not ready to leave you," he told Catherine one evening as he recovered, his voice still raspy from the cough that plagued him. "We have too many years left together." "Then you better get well," Catherine said firmly, though her eyes were red from crying. "I did not partner with you for 40 years just to have you quit on me now, Cole Stewart." Cole laughed, which turned into a cough, but he squeezed her hand. "Yes, madam, whatever my equal partner says." He did recover, though he never quite regained all his strength. They adjusted again, the way they had adjusted to every challenge their partnership had faced. Cole focused on the aspects of ranching he could still manage from the house and the near corrals. Catherine continued her work with the Women's Association and her mentoring of younger ranchers. Together, they watched their legacy continue through their children and grandchildren. On a warm evening in June 1925, the entire Stewart family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. It was Catherine and Cole's 40th wedding anniversary, and their children had organized a party that brought together family and friends from across the territory. There were over 50 people in attendance, including many of the women Catherine had mentored through the years. Daniel stood up to make a toast. His own children gathered around him. 40 years ago, my mother and father stood before this community and pledged their lives to each other. But their partnership started before that, in a moment when my father chose to see my mother not as society saw her, but as she truly was. He introduced her as his equal partner when women were expected to be silent and invisible. That single act of respect and recognition changed not just their lives, but the lives of everyone in this room. They showed us that true partnership means genuine equality, that love means supporting each other's strength rather than fearing it. They built a ranch and a family and a legacy that will outlast all of us. To Cole and Catherine Stewart, the best partners and the best parents we could have asked for. Everyone raised their glasses, and Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. Cole wrapped his arm around her shoulders and kissed her temple, just as he had done countless times over the decades. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too," she whispered back, "always and forever." The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and stories shared about the early days of the ranch and the many adventures the Stewart family had experienced over the years. Catherine danced with Cole, moving slowly and carefully, but still finding joy in being in his arms. She danced with each of her children and many of her grandchildren. She accepted congratulations and well wishes from people who had known her as the unconventional woman rancher, and from younger people who had grown up knowing no other model of partnership. As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, Catherine and Cole stood together on the porch, just as they had so many times before. The ranch stretched out before them in the moonlight, a testament to everything they had built together. "No regrets," Cole said softly. "No regrets," Catherine agreed. "Only gratitude." They went inside together, walking slowly, supporting each other the way they always had. In their bedroom, they prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of 40 years together. When they finally lay down, Catherine rested her head on Cole's shoulder, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong despite the years. "We did it," she said softly. "We built something real and lasting. We proved that it was possible." "We did," Cole agreed, "and it was worth every moment, every challenge, every time we had to stand up and fight for what we believed in. You were worth it all, Catherine. You always were." Cole lived another 3 years, passing peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1928 at the age of 72. Catherine was beside him when he went, holding his hand and whispering her love one final time. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that left her breathless, but she was surrounded by her children and grandchildren, by the family they had built and the legacy they had created together. At Cole's funeral, Catherine spoke about their partnership, about the man who had seen her as an equal when the world told him she was lesser. She talked about his courage and his kindness, his willingness to stand against convention for what he believed was right. She talked about the ranch they had built together, every fence post and water trough a testament to their shared vision and hard work. "Cole taught me that love is not about possession or control," she said, her voice breaking but staying strong. "Love is about partnership and respect and believing in each other's potential. He gave me the space to become who I was meant to be, and in doing so, he became the best version of himself. That is what marriage should be. That is what partnership means, and I will be grateful for every day I had with him until I draw my last breath." Catherine lived another 10 years after Cole's death, staying active in the ranch operations and in the community until her health began to fail. She was surrounded always by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, by people who loved her and respected her and understood the importance of what she and Cole had built together. On a quiet evening in early autumn 1938, Catherine passed away in her sleep at the age of 79. She was buried beside Cole on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a headstone that read, "Catherine Walsh Stewart, rancher and partner, 1859-1938, she was never invisible." The Stewart Ranch continued for generations after, always run as a partnership, always valuing the contributions of every family member regardless of gender. The story of Cole and Catherine became a legend in Marysvale, told to children and grandchildren as an example of what love and respect and genuine equality could build. And on the hill where they were buried together, 2 headstones stood side by side under the wide Utah sky, marking the final resting place of 2 people who had defied expectations, challenged convention, and proven that true partnership between equals could create something beautiful and lasting. They had loved each other fiercely and completely, had built a life of meaning and purpose, and had left behind a legacy that would echo through generations. The wind whispered through the grass around their graves, carrying with it the sounds of the ranch they had built, the laughter of children who played in the fields they had tended, the lowing of cattle descended from the herds they had raised. Their love story was over, but its impact continued, a testament to the power of seeing another person truly, of respecting them completely, of building something together as genuine equals. In the end, That was the greatest gift they had given each other, and the world. Proof that partnership based on mutual respect and genuine equality could not only survive but thrive, creating ripples that would spread far beyond their own lives and into a future they could have never imagined but would have been proud to see.